Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're actually taking a trip back over a century, back to 1908. We're examining a really foundational text from the early self-help movement. It's Orison Swett Marden's classic, He Can Who Thinks He Can.
Yeah, and it's more than just what we think of as self-help today. It's almost like a manual, isn't it, for maximizing personal potential, and written during this time of huge change, industrially, socially.
Right. So our mission here is to kind of distill Marden's philosophy. It's powerful, sometimes pretty maximalist, actually. We want to get past the older language and pull out clear insights for you. Maybe spark some aha moments about your own capabilities.
Exactly, and the core tension he keeps coming back to is this gap between, let's say, latent ability, what you could do, and realized power, what you actually do.
Yeah, we all have potential, right? Marden asks why so few people really tap into it fully, and he's completely uncompromising on this. He says success is not an accident, not at all. It's rooted, for him, entirely in deliberately building up these internal forces. And the main one, colossal self-belief.
And that focus on the internal is, I think, what makes it still feel so relevant. Marden gets that your mindset isn't, isolated. He sort of sees success as this interconnected system. Your beliefs shape the environment you look for, and then that environment either boosts your potential or kind of shuts it down. It's actually a surprisingly modern way of looking at things, like a roadmap for getting yourself aligned.
Okay, so let's start right there with the title itself. He can who thinks he can. When Marden talks about belief, though, it's not just like thinking positive thoughts, is it?
Oh, not at all. He demands colossal faith. That's his term. He genuinely suggests that this level of conviction can literally double, treble, maybe even quadruple your ordinary power.
Wow. So it's like an engine upgrade, not just polishing the car.
Exactly. He wasn't about gentle encouragement. He was about gigantic assurance, total conviction. He points to historical figures, Napoleon, Luther, Wesley, people who just radiated absolute certainty in what they were doing.
But the example he uses that really jumped out at me was Jeanne of Arc. Just the simple country maiden, he says, zero military background, no political connections.
Right. Her only real asset, according to Marden, was this divine self-confidence. And that internal conviction, he argues, multiplied her power 1,000 times over. The external situation didn't matter as much as her belief. That inner force just catalyzed massive change.
Incredible.
And for his readers back in 1908, maybe a more relatable example was President Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt. Marden observed that Roosevelt's colossal self-confidence half wins the battle before he begins. That certainty comes first. It's the prerequisite.
Okay, but what about the flip side? What if you don't have that certainty? What's the cost then?
Well, Marden is blunt. The cost is total failure. He actually calls self-depreciation, putting yourself down, a crime.
A crime? That's pretty strong language.
It is, but I think he means it in terms of, like, wasting potential. If you act like a failure, think like one, talk like one, even walk like one, you're basically paving the road for failure yourself.
So it's the opportunity cost again. It's not just feeling bad, it's the energy you project outward.
Precisely. He gives this really sad example of job seekers. They fail not because they lack skills, necessarily, but because they walk into an office with a confession of weakness in their very manner. It's written all over them.
They surrender before the interview even really starts.
Exactly. They project defeat, and the world, well, it often just confirms that belief for them. That's why Marden sees self-belief as almost an ethical duty. You owe it to yourself to believe.
Okay, so you build up this colossal belief. Then you need to aim it somewhere, right? It needs direction. That brings us to the idea of an overmastering purpose. You can't just wish for things.
Definitely not. Wishing, for Marden, is just lukewarm water. It does nothing. Purpose needs to be this all-consuming passion. He says it must boil, must be made into live steam.
Live steam. I like that image.
Yeah. And again, think about Theodore Roosevelt. Marden loved using him as an example. Roosevelt's secret wasn't just being efficient, it was total commitment. Marden said he was flinging his whole life, not a part of it, into everything he did. That's the difference, having a goal versus having an overmastering purpose that guides, well, pretty much every choice you make.
Okay, so we've got the foundation, that massive self-belief coupled with a driving purpose. Now let's look at the external stuff. The forces that Marden says can either wake you up or keep you asleep. It's kind of startling when he points out that so many people reach middle age having only developed like a tiny fraction of their ability.
Yeah, just dormant potential. Vast amounts of it just sitting there, unused.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it, how many potential geniuses are just walking around completely unaware.
It's the tragedy of unawakened potential, as he saw it. And the key question Marden keeps asking is, what causes the shift? What's the catalyst that, sparks a revolution in someone's life? And interestingly, he suggests it's often not some internal flash of insight, but an external stimulus that finally hits the right note.
He tells that incredible story about the blacksmith, the illiterate blacksmith who gets woken up in middle life.
Yes. A guy with no formal education probably just accepted his path, right?
Okay.
Then he goes to this one lecture about the value of education. And that single event, that external input, was like a match hitting dry tinder. Boom. It just stirred something inside him that was sleeping. He decides to learn, ends up getting the best library in a city, becomes this highly respected judge.
Wow.
The ability was apparently always there, latent, but it needed that external jolt, that sort of environmental shock to wake it up.
And sometimes that environment isn't just one lecture, it's a whole place, a whole city. Which brings us to Marshall Field, the department store guy. Apparently, someone who knew him early on thought he'd never make it as a merchant.
Right, Deacon Davis. And that assessment was probably based on Field's environment at that specific time. But then Field moves to Chicago in 1856. Marden calls it a marvelous city, just starting on its unparalleled career.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly, everything changes for Field. Marden says success was just in the air.
Like you could breathe it in.
Pretty much. Field saw other poor boys succeeding, getting ahead, and it finally lit a fire under his own ambition. The city itself acted like this huge incubator. It totally reshaped his outlook. It just shows how vital it is to put yourself somewhere success feels possible, even tangible.
Marden really doubles down on this idea of surroundings, doesn't he? He claims the environment's effect is incredibly powerful. He even cites research, I think, from a New York Children's Society, concluding that environment is actually stronger than heredity.
Which is a massive claim, especially for 1908. When ideas about eugenics and innate traits were really gaining ground, Marden's pushing back hard, arguing for nurture for choice over some fixed destiny. And he uses that cautionary tale to really hammer it home, the story of the Russian workmen sent to America.
Oh, right. They came over, they learned American methods, got that dynamic spirit.
Totally absorbed it,
Yeah.
went back home full of energy and new ideas,
Yeah.
ready to shake things up. But Marden followed up. A year later, back in their old environment, what he called the deadening, non-progressive atmosphere had basically reclaimed them.
Mm-hmm.
The stimulus was gone, the energy faded, and they just slipped back into being plodders, as he put it.
So the lesson is?
Be aggressive about your environment. Marden's advice is basically, you have to keep yourself in an ambition-arousing atmosphere. Surround yourself with people who believe in you, who encourage you, who praise your efforts. And if your current environment is draining you or holding you back, his advice is stark. Get out. Escape it.
That ties directly into the tools for growth, then. If the right atmosphere is the fuel, then continuous learning and self-reliance seem to be the engine.
Marden says the best educated people aren't necessarily the ones with the most degrees, but those who are always learning, always absorbing knowledge from every possible source. Exactly. He calls it education by absorption. It's this ongoing, subtle process. It's about really using the tools you already have, like your powers of observation. He gives those two great examples for training observation. First, there's the father quizzing his son about shop windows they pass.
Right, forcing him to actually see the details, not just glance.
And then there's the famous one about Professor Agassiz and the fish.
Ah, yes, the fish story.
Agassiz gives his students a fish, tells them to study it. They spend hours, come back, say, okay, we've seen the fish. And Agassiz just sends them back, saying, basically, no, you haven't really seen it yet. Again and again.
Until they look deeper.
Until they truly observe. Marden's point is crucial. You have to train your observation until your eye looks with your brain. You need to absorb the details, the nuances of the world, because that's where so much unwritten knowledge is hidden.
And the practical way to do this absorption, day to day, seems to come down to managing time. Specifically, those little pockets of time. Marden puts huge value on using the odds and ends of time, the spare minutes here and there. He calls using those short bursts for study a great success asset.
Yeah, it's like he predicted microlearning 100 years early. Think about the young man he mentions, never went to high school. But just by using every spare minute he could find reading, studying is fine, he educated himself so well that he eventually became a professor.
Incredible. In Marden's day, this often meant correspondence schools, right? Which he really championed.
He did. He praised them for getting thousands of ordinary workers, clerks, factory hands to save those bits of time for self-improvement. For us today, maybe that's listening to something educational like this on your commute instead of, I don't know, scrolling endlessly. It's about that constant small accumulation.
But all this learning and purpose, it also needs freedom to operate, doesn't it? Marden's definition of preparing for success involves achieving absolute freedom from everything which strangles ambition, discourages effort, and hinders progress.
Yeah, freedom at any cost.
It sounds dramatic because, well, it often is. It means you might have to make some tough, maybe painful choices. You've got to cut the cords holding you back.
What kind of cords?
Could be physical things. He uses the analogy of a runner weighed down by extra clothes. Simple hindrances. Or they could be moral burdens, financial ones like debt. Or even just being stuck in an environment that doesn't suit you, maybe staying out of habit or misplaced loyalty.
Is there a risk of being reckless with that mindset, though? You know, the burning bridges you might need later, that's the tension, absolutely.
Yeah.
Marden doesn't shy away from the difficulty, but he suggests something interesting, that the very effort required to break free, say, from poverty or a bad situation, often forces you to tap into reserves of strength, spiritual and physical, that you didn't even know you had. The struggle itself develops you. The struggle is the real reward, in a way.
Okay, shifting gears slightly to vision. Marden insists the world owes its biggest advancements to dreamers. We often think of dreamers as impractical, but he holds up people like Columbus, Edison, Fulton as true prophets.
Right, because they didn't just dream. They had the power, the will to make those visions real. The contrast he draws is so clear. The person without imagination sees a challenge and says, it can't be done. The person with vision, the dreamer, sees the same challenge and declares, it can be done and it shall be done.
That's pure conviction again. But he does add a reality check, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah. He's quick to warn that dreaming has to be linked to hard work. Otherwise, that divine vision, as he calls it, just fades away. Ambition gets paralyzed if you don't act on the dream. Dreams need action to have value.
And that action needs to be authentic. He's really strong on originality versus imitation.
Feels about it. Imitation, he says flat out, is weakness. He uses that beautiful line. Nature breaks her mold at every new birth. Each person is unique. Trying to be someone else just makes you well, poor copy, misfit. Your self-belief has to come from expressing your own unique pattern, not someone else's.
And speaking of patterns, Marden is crystal clear about the ultimate foundation, the ultimate capital, integrity. He says success has to pass the test of your own conscience. Any money made through dirty work is bad business, period.
Yeah, that's a non-negotiable for him. He sets a really high bar. He used that famous Lincoln test. Lincoln supposedly refused a case because he knew deep down it was wrong. He said if he took it, he'd just be thinking, Lincoln, you're a liar the whole time. And he worried he might actually blurt it out in court.
That's commitment to integrity.
Exactly. Character, for Marden, is the only asset that truly lasts. It doesn't depreciate. That's your real capital.
And this focus on character leads right into his views on luck, or rather his anti-luck philosophy. He admits luck exists, someone else gets fired, you get promoted, that kind of thing. But he insists that real, sustainable success, never just an accident.
Luck, Marden basically says, is just the tide. Sometimes it flows with you, sometimes against you. But the strong person rows. They use the tide if it helps, but they row against it if they have to. Success, at its core, comes down to character, merit, being prepared, and being willing to pay the price. And if you think the price is too steep, well, Marden would just say you don't want it badly enough. Simple as that.
So, wrapping this all up, what does it mean for us today? Marden's blueprint, written way back then, seems to demand these four things, right? Colossal self-belief, number one. Number two, deliberately choosing an environment that fuels your ambition.
Right. Then third, constant growth through that absorption method, always learning. And fourth, absolute unwavering integrity. That's the foundation holding it all up.
And that leads to his final challenge, doesn't it? This idea about our debt to civilization.
Yeah, it's powerful. Marden firmly believed the world doesn't owe anyone a living. Just doesn't. He says the universe only recognizes one form of legal tender, personal service, contribution, everything we enjoy. He argues the coffee we drink, the technology we use, the roads we drive on, it all represents the hard work, the struggle, the service of others who came before us.
So you have to contribute something back, earn your keep, basically, through service, which brings it all back to the struggle itself, doesn't it? Marden argues the ultimate reward isn't really the money or the status you might achieve. Those are just side effects, almost incidental.
Exactly. The real prize, the actual goal of all the effort and striving, is the development of a strong man, a strong person, character, resilience, power.
So if the external rewards the money, the position are just incidental.
Then we have to ask ourselves this final, maybe provocative question Marden leaves us with. What is the human giant, that ultimate version of yourself, full of character and capability that nature or the universe or whatever you want to call it is trying to shape out of your current situation, out of the struggles you're facing right now, and out of that colossal belief you might dare to hold of what you can ultimately become.